your opinion about the gradual recession of the European Green parties. How could this be explained, given that nowadays the environmental problems appear to be more severe, while at the same time people seem to adopt a loose but environmentally friendly attitude?
Is this on? Is this live?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. First, I'd like to say that I haven't been following the trajectory of the Western European Greens closely in recent years, but my understanding is that they've become more and more indistinguishable from other left of center or even center parties, while the rest of the parties are using green or adopting green policies now, so that there's a greater indistinguishability. And the reason the other parties are adopting environmental platforms is because more people are concerned. So I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I also want to say that I'm not a close observer of Western European politics. I'm a biographer, and in this interview generally, I'm here as a person who's writing a biography of Murray Bookchin. I know in the past I've written theoretical books, but I'm not engaged in any movement right now. I'm not engaged in organizing. I'm not working with a movement. I'm working as a scholar, basically. And so when you're going to ask me theoretical questions, what I'm going to try to do is answer them from the perspective that I would interpret Bookchin would answer them, based on my knowledge of him. Because I don't feel it's comfortable or appropriate for somebody who's not engaged in the movement to speak extensively on theoretical matters. That's just a general comment for this interview.
So, Eirik, do you think that societies can exist that they are ecological but simultaneously hierarchical? Bookchin referred to ancient Egypt or the Incas as such examples, and we know today from Τζάνετ work the movements that support the coming of a green era. What is your opinion on this?
I think that in order to create an ecological society, we have to seek to create social structures that are able to make it possible for us to get together as human beings and to create the necessary ecological policies. And when you speak about ecological societies, I assume you mean societies that do not have a destructive impact on their natural surroundings. For me, and for social ecology, that's a very limited perspective on what an ecological society would mean, because I think that in order for human beings to be ecological, it doesn't only involve this or that green policy, fighting against pollution or making sure that there will be a recycling of resources, renewable energy, use of renewable energy sources and so on. I believe that the creation of an ecological society above all is the creation of a society where human beings are able to deliberate about what the relationship between nature and society should be like. So in that sense, the communalist approach of creating popular assemblies and opening up society is to a very large extent the attempt to create a society self-conscious of itself, conscious of itself and its place in nature. So I think that the very fact that we can open society so that we can have ethical discussions and make ethical deliberations about those issues are just as fundamental as the actual policies we implement. And in this sense, I would say that no, the Inca society or the time of the pharaohs were not in any sense ecological society. They were environmentally perhaps stable, perhaps not. There are many examples from the past how relatively simple societies and social organizations destroy their natural surroundings, but you can say that it didn't have that destructive impact on nature. But this is not at all what social ecology is for me and how I interpret Bookchin and other social ecologist ideas, because one of the major challenges for the social ecology movement is not only to create a society free of hierarchies, but a society which place people on a par, on an equal footing, so that we can all make these deliberations. And I do not trust that a Führer or a strong party or a centralized state or a United Nations with increased powers would implement ecological measures, not to speak of an ecological society, particularly because you would still have that disempowerment, you would still have the reduction of ordinary human beings into passive spectators, and I think that's one of the biggest obstacles in creating a free and ecological society. And I think also that if you have a centralized state or an principle, you have no guarantees. Maybe they will implement ecological policies, maybe they won't, but you will not have a say in that directionality of society.
Janet, some comrades have expressed a remark concerning Bookchin's social anarchism or lifestyle anarchism. More precisely, they argue that before the publication of this particular work of Bookchin, the chance hadn't been unreasonable, but became so after its publication, as it's that Bookchin strictly draws the line between the two tensions. Do you think that Murray's approach was meaningful in that particular historical phase?
I think if that's what happened, then Murray succeeded in his goal. I think it was precisely what he wanted to do was to identify the phenomenon of lifestyle anarchism and strongly distinguish it from a social anarchist tradition. In this sense, the debate with lifestyle anarchism actually greatly resembled the debate with deep ecology. It's a difference between an approach to social change that involves broader scale organizing as opposed to individual solutions. Sometimes I thought the critique of deep ecology could have been called a critique of lifestyle ecology, or the critique of social anarchism, or lifestyle anarchism could have been called critique of deep anarchism. There's in both lifestyle anarchism and deep ecology is a focus on individual solutions, on recycling, on transforming individual consciousness, on mysticism in the case of deep ecology, in the case of lifestyle anarchism, again, individual actions, ad hoc. So there's a similarity in these two debates that Murray opened up between 1989 and 1995. And I think precisely his purpose in both cases was to identify an approach that he thought was problematic because it was so individualistic, in favor of an approach that depended on organizing, forming broad movements and organizing communities and making communal social change. At this time in the United States, this was the era of the first Bush and Clinton, an age of the prosperity and free market ideology, and he thought that in many ways the focus on individualism in the radical movements was sort of a filtered effect of the individualist ideology that was so prevalent in mainstream American society at the time. So yes, he thought it was necessary in order to create the social revolution to which he was committed his whole life. It was necessary to keep one's focus on social ecology and social anarchism as opposed to these other trends.
Anyway, I have a question with two parts. It's about your group, Democratic Alternatives. And we know that you with your group have participated in the municipal election. So we would like you to share your own experience with us. And the second part of the question, on the same topic, is also to do with elections. And the specific question is that when you hold the vision of an anti-hierarchical society, how do you believe that it is possible to stand outside the game of political authority when the government authority is interwoven with the local authority?
First of all, Democratic Alternative is a communalist organization which works at attacking the structures of existing society and promoting social movements and social struggles that will is necessary to achieve those changes within society and our culture. And I think that to this end we're engaged with a lot of activities in our local groups. Particularly also we place a high premium on education, study groups, lectures, leaflets, getting out on all fields, like as communalists and like most left libertarians do. But we also acknowledge the need to run candidates in local elections. This has not been a major focus of our activism. It is something we've done in one election so far, but we have been involved in some other attempts on the local level, both within the elections and within the work of community organizations which we have in neighborhoods. The fact that we promote participation in local elections will be developed much further in the future, but I can explain briefly what happened the first time, which was now in Oslo. But these has to be seen in context of our larger struggle and our forms of organization. We decided now in Oslo to run for the elections, and we did not get any candidates in, but that was not either our purpose. We were hesitant at first not because we were in favor of elections or against elections, but because we wondered whether it was possible, because there was so few in the Oslo group at the time. So we were wondering, do we have the resources to run for these elections? Is it possible for us now to use this opportunity to educate people, which was our main objective? And after some hesitancy, we came up with the conclusion that we should try to do it, because we need to get engaged with those institutions sooner or later, and so we chose to do it. This meant that we had very few resources at the time. I was not involved in the campaign. I lived far away, relatively far away in another community, and did not take part in its practical experience. But we went first on the streets to collect the signatures, because you have to have a certain amount of signatures to be registered as an electoral list, which gave us a wonderful opportunity to go out and talk to people about political alternatives and direct democracy. And later on, a few people had to draft a program, so the whole process got very delayed for us. And we drafted the program, and we got it out during the summer, late July, and then the elections was in September, and many of us were away, also several of the Oslo groups, central people in the Oslo group. So we are not happy about how much we were able to contribute in using this opportunity. But we managed to write a program for Oslo which deals with how we envision the changes on a political scale, on an economic and cultural and social scale, on a cultural scale, and on an ecological scale. So very happy about that. I'm also very satisfied that we managed to run for the election and call for direct democracy as an alternative, because one of the important things about the election is not only that it gives us an opportunity to reach out, but people are more receptive in that period to political ideas. And it's unfortunate that people care about this only every fourth year, or when there's a bigger issue like the European referendums that we've had in Norway. But so we think it's a very good way of educating people, and this is also what the experience were. Although we were few people, we were too late with our materials. We did not get any candidates voted in, and we could have done a lot more. I think it's a successful election on our part, particularly because we managed to show that there is an alternative to party politics. That's the first part of your question. The second part is concerns whether it is possible to create, with our vision of a non-hierarchical society, to how we can avoid being compromised in our struggle to restructure our municipalities, so that we create a direct democracy and enhance non-hierarchical social forms, and the fact that today it's interwoven with central political authority, or the political authority of the municipal council, if I understood you correctly. I think that what distinguishes communalists and communalism from mainstream party politics, and even the Green parties, on the one hand, as well as the traditional Marxist approach on the one hand, and the anarchist approach on the other hand, is particularly the will to, the recognition of the necessity to deal with the question of power in a practical manner. So I think that while we do not reject political power in a sense, we want to restructure it and make it democratic. So how can we do this when the system today resembles a miniature state, and that the tentacles of the state reaches into even the smallest communities very often? And I think that this is precisely the struggle. This is precisely the challenges that we have to deal with. But we have to deal with it precisely because we need to create a counterpower to the existing system. And since we believe that the municipalities should be the basic political unit of a future society, one that is rational and free, I think that the work to enter municipalities, to enter municipal institutions, not in order to improve them as such, or to play the role of better social democrats or better green politicians, but in order to fundamentally restructure them on the basis of a communalist program. I think this is necessary, and since we will not achieve these changes overnight, it's necessary that we enter into these institutions, even though it will imply a struggle that I don't know how it's said, that is not of our own choosing. But we do believe that although today the municipalities are hierarchical and do have many state-like features, they can and will potentially, they are potentially direct democracies, and it's our struggle to reshape them. I'm not sure if that was clearly, because it was a very long question. So, but particularly, I want to say one thing, because this is not about gaining control over the municipal councils. It's about being a presence there, not only for educational purposes. We also want to fight for concrete institutional changes, small reforms, minor demands that hopefully can be escalated. But this is precisely to create popular assemblies in the neighborhood and also to legitimize them and gradually empower them. And it is in these popular assemblies that the real struggles against hierarchies and also the control of the politicians will take place. And this attempt to enter into municipal institutions is precisely to create these forums and legitimize them and empower them. Yes.
Yeah, you stay on the same issue of elections and questions what you raised.
For whom?
For Eirik. In many countries such as Greece, the power that municipal council have is very limited and to a large extent controlled by the central state. In such cases where participation in elections for those councils is not an option, which other lasting and stable institutions do you see as suitable for advancement, participation, empowerment, and direct democracy on a local level?
Nowhere in Europe, nowhere that I know of, are the municipalities not conditioned by the state in some respect or another. There exists no free cities, no free municipalities, no free communities everywhere, anywhere, as far as I can judge. The question is to what extent, how hard is this control, how much is centralized, and what openings do exist in existing structures, whether in Greece, where there may be very tight central control, or in other countries like Switzerland, which may have very much local control, but still conditioned by the state in some respect. The question is, how can we look for the cracks in that structure? How can we look for opportunities to enter and democratize? I think that this is not, again, just a part of the election, the need to run for candidates for elections and the need to restructure existing city councils and so on, is precisely to complement those other social struggles. So if you judge that in Thessaloniki or in other Greek cities, it is not possible to work with the neighborhoods or work with the municipal councils or work with the local committees right now, right here, then you must look for what else to work with on your local level, because we have to not only have ideas and ideals about direct democracy, we must see how it can be translated into a political practice that is meaningful for ordinary people. And by direct democracy, I do not mean an assembly of 10, 15, 20, 30 people. I do not mean just a congregation of people from the various social movements. We're speaking of institutions in the neighborhoods, in the wards, in the municipalities that can potentially be empowered so that they can be the founding stones of the new democratic political structure. So what other lasting institutions do I see? It's in Norway. I can point to many radical traditions. I can point to many opportunities that I see, not only the elections, but here in Thessaloniki and elsewhere in Greece, I learn about historical experiments. I learn about wonderful traditions. I learn about forms of community organizations which are really exciting. And I think that despite the apparent that many openings may not seem immediately available, I think that you have great opportunities to translate this political program into a radical practice. And I think that exactly what type of action and what type of course you choose will be for you to decide. But sooner or later, I think we will have to face the need to restructure our municipalities, restructure our municipal councils, take power down from the state, take it away from the corporations and place it in the hands of the people on a lasting, permanent, structural level. And to this end, not the municipalities of today, nor the community organization, nor any other social movements are there as examples or models to take. This is an approach which tries to see all the possibilities which exist in a community against the parties, against the state, against the corporations.
Janet, you conduct the local elections as part of the political struggle for a communalist society. Why aren't you adapting to the national elections? Couldn't parliament representatives be recallable mandates of the confederal movement?
Bukshan argued that parliamentary representatives do more than just deliver the instructions of their base. They actually make decisions, and that when one votes for a legislator, one is essentially giving up one's claim to one's ability to participate in popular sovereignty, turning it over to legislators to act on and to make decisions for him or her. This was the conclusion to not operate on the upper levels came after a certain amount of thought and internal struggle with him. It wasn't immediately evident. In the early 80s, he was involved in a campaign regarding the governor of the state of Vermont. As you may know, the governorship of the state of Vermont lasts only 2 years. There's a 2-year term. In most of the United States, it's 4 years or 6 years. And this 2-year term dates back to, it's very old in the history of Vermont, and it dates back to the tradition of popular self-rule in the state. Murray waged a campaign in the early 80s when there was a move to extend the term of the governor from 4 years to 6 years. He argued, no, it needs to stay 2 years. So he did take a position on this state-level phenomenon, and one might argue that was inappropriate for someone arguing that we should only work at the local level. But I think he was still, people's ideas develop, and I think he was still thinking it out. This is just when he first started writing about libertarianism and communalism, and I don't think that. But by the time of the organizing of the Left Green Network in the late 80s, he was working with a man named Howard Hawkins, who was a very active green organizer, social ecologist, who played a major role in organizing Vermont Greens, New England Greens, North American Greens. And Howard wanted to run for statewide office. He wanted to, maybe not for governor, but for other statewide office. And there was a debate at a meeting in Plainfield, Vermont of the Left Green Network where Murray fully and decisively came out against this position. And his argument was that the mandated delegates need to be as close as possible to the people, just as geographically close. We're talking about a confederation grounded in a politically and physically decentralized society. And he couldn't find. He knew that his he was also still at this time trying to appeal to the communalist tradition within anarchism. He was arguing with anarchists, and he knew that he was trying to recall to them their communalists, their interest in the Paris Commune, and the role that communalist ideas played in 19th century anarchism.